I rescued the son of a criminal who was humiliated by my cousin, freed him from slavery, cleared his name, and brought him into my family. Until the day when he became the most powerful official in the country, he had my entire family executed, leaving me alone to live, and I was abandoned by everyone. His eyes were filled with disgust. Who asked you to save me? I am willing to accept whatever Ajin treats me like. She suffered for you, for 10 years. You must pay back everything you owe her. After being reborn, I watched him coldly as he was beaten to death by my cousin and crawled to my feet to ask for help. I cut off the hem of her skirt with a sword. What a dirty thing, sister. Take care of your dog. 01. I was reborn on the day I rescued Gu Zhiyi. It was a beautiful spring day, and there was a grand polo match at the royal palace. Jiang Xingjin lost 3 games to me in a row. In a rage, he swung at Gu Zhiyi, who was holding the horse. He was once the most powerful young master in the capital, but now he is a lowly horse slave, bullied by others. In order to blend in with those noble young men and women, Jiang Xingjin would always take Gu Zhiyi with him whenever he went out. She never used a stool to get on or off the carriage. Instead, Gu Zhiyi would kneel on the ground and support her with both hands to get on the horse. If things didn't go his way, he would whip and beat people, which caused the former classmates of Gu Zhiyi to add insult to injury, and some even beat him up under the pretext of helping Jiang Xingjin vent his anger. Jiang's sister is really capable. Even the former #1 son has now become your horse slave. Jiang Xingjin became more and more proud, as if he had stepped on the former #1 young master and became a figure above the title of Lingjia. His behavior became more and more excessive. Gu Zhiyi often appeared with scars all over his body and gloomy eyes. There was no trace of his former elegance. Even those young masters disdained to play this ungraceful game. Only Jiang Xingjin still beats and scolds them. In my previous life, I thought that at such a grand event, her behavior would only damage her reputation. Today's polo clubs do not seem to be without the meaning of competition between the top families. However, I didn't expect that the more I tried to stop her, the more ruthless Jiang Xingjin became. Seeing Gu Zhiyi covered with whip marks, I became angry and started an argument with her. I saved Gu Zhiyi at the cost of getting whipped myself. She whipped me with all her might. The marks on my back were deep enough to penetrate my bones. The tail of the whip also raked my cheek, leaving an indelible scar. I had a high fever and inflammation, and it almost cost me my life. By the time I recovered from my illness, the whole capital had already spread the rumor that I had secretly communicated with the son of a guilty minister. People even spread the rumor and killed people, and everyone was talking about it for money. Jiang Xingjin even sent Gu Zhiyi, who was beaten half to death, to our hospital. Since my cousin likes it so much, I'll give it to you. It's just a dog. From then on, my reputation was ruined. 02. I lost my mother when I was young, but fortunately my grandmother took care of me and raised me. But when such a big thing happened, several of my aunts were afraid that I would hinder the marriage of their daughters, so they threatened to commit suicide to force my grandmother to send me back home. If this unlucky star doesn't go away, everyone will think that the girls raised by the old lady are of such character, who will dare to propose marriage to them in the future. We won't dare to let you teach our girls in the future. Not only was I denounced as worthless, but my grandmother was also accused of being immoral in her old age. No matter how much my grandmother favored me, she had to send me back home. Fortunately, my father only has me as his daughter and has long been planning to marry me, so he doesn't have to worry about my marriage. Gu Zhiyi was not just a name. After entering the Marquis of Yu's mansion, he rose rapidly to prominence. Until, when he reached the highest position in the government, he had my entire family executed. I then found out that he had been engaged to Jiang Xingjin. His family was convicted, and his father was executed, saving the lives of his wife and children. Gu Zhiyi used the token as evidence to ask the Jiang family for help, but the engagement was torn up and the token was smashed. In order to get food, she voluntarily sold herself to the Jiang family as a slave. Over the years, his hatred for the Jiang family was obvious to all. Such a powerful family became impoverished, and even the married Jiang Xingjin was not spared. This forced Jiang Xingjin's husband's family to send her back home with a divorce letter. Everyone thought that he was going to kill the Jiang family, but no one expected that he would turn around and point his sword at the Yu family. The entire Wei family was killed, leaving me alone alive. Then I realized that he didn't hate Jiang Xingjin for humiliating him, but hated her for breaking off their engagement. No wonder he couldn't sleep all night when he learned that his cousin was marrying up. 03. Mr. Gu was almost beaten to death. Why didn't you go and save him? Jiang Xingjin was not satisfied after breaking the golf club, so he changed to a riding whip. The elegant young man who had been a high-ranking official in his previous life was now lying on the ground, desperately protecting his vital parts, his blood soaking into the soil. Why should I save him? And why do you care so much about a slave? Shi Lu's face froze. Didn't you send me to deliver ointment when you saw Master Gu being beaten before? I'm just curious. Why didn't you stop my cousin today? Oh, it doesn't make sense to save him just because you gave him the ointment. This bastard was extremely suspicious and was beaten by Jiang Xingjin until he was bedridden. In order to get medicine, he was forced to crawl into the servant's crotch and finally got a bottle of low-quality gold abscess medicine. I sent him medicine out of kindness, but after we got married, I only found that crudely made gold medicine bottle in his box. Maybe I should have realized then that this was all just part of the fun between a couple. It was not until the day when my family fell into trouble that I realized that Shi Lu had always been the spy sent to me by Jiang Xingjin. At first, she was forced by Jiang Xingjin to wash clothes with well water in the cold winter. Her hands were frozen red and purple. If the doctor had come a little later, she would have been rotten to death. I asked Jiang Xingjin for her, but I forgot that her bond was still with the Jiang family. In the end, the maid was not mine, and I was punished by my grandmother to kneel because of Jiang Xingjin's crying. For the first time, my grandmother spoke out in anger. There are so many injustices and hardships in the world. Can't you just take care of them one by one? I was so naive at that time that I accepted the punishment but refused to admit the truth. At least I changed a person's fate today. The life of a servant is the least important life. If her hands are damaged, Shi Lu will be driven out of the house, and only an even more tragic fate will be waiting for her. Being kind is not a bad thing. But since that day, I also understood that the premise of being kind is to protect yourself first. But it was these hands that I saved that pushed me under Jiang Xingjin's whip today. I have always suspected that I was pushed out, but after being whipped I was shocked and frightened and fainted from fright. When I woke up, bad things happened one after another. I can no longer remember what happened that day. On the day when the Wei family was executed, Shi Lu became Gu Zhiyi's concubine. She looked down at me from above in her silk dress. When the young lady marries me, I will ask her to send you to live out your days in peace on the farm. This will be a way of repaying your kindness. 04. I looked at Jiang Xingjin with pity, while explaining to Shi Lu. You don't understand. This is not just a minor family quarrel. Look at the ladies of the various mansions. They seem to be sitting on the high platform, but they are actually looking after their own sons. As a younger sister, how can I go against my cousin just because of a horse slave? In an occasion like this, every word and action represents the family. It's okay that my cousin has only grown in height but not in intelligence, but why didn't my cousin from the Jiang family hold back a little? After all, he is the only one who is qualified to educate my cousin. In less than half a cup of tea, Shi Lu hurried away on the pretext of going to the toilet and headed in the direction where the men outside were talking loudly. Just at this moment, the prize for the polo game was brought to me. It is a ruby pendant hairpin made in the palace. Such a good thing cannot be bought anywhere else. The Jiang family is a family of civil officials and have few opportunities to receive rewards from the palace. Jiang Xingjin is counting on this hairpin to stand out among the girls in the Jiang family. Seeing that Jiang Xingjin was about to stop, I held up the hairpin, lifted up the hem of my skirt, and ran over, just out of the range of her whip. The sound was neither too loud nor too soft, just loud enough for the ladies around who wanted to come and see the prize to hear. Cousin, I'm not trying to take advantage of you. I already gave you 3 goals, but I didn't expect you to win by a narrow margin. If you are angry because you lost your love, how about I give you this hairpin? After all, the Marquis's mansion has received many awards, and I am not short of hairpins. Jiang Xingjin was about to stop, but I provoked him again and swung the whip towards Gu Zhiyi with a sound of breaking through the air. I'm not mad at this broken hairpin. I'm just mad at myself for losing the game. It's all because of this bastard slave who didn't take good care of my horse. The winning goal was just a hair's breadth away from going in, but the horse didn't run as fast as usual. The ladies around her who were not used to her rolled their eyes and said, "She is trying to save face when she is not as good as others." She even blamed the loss of the polo game on the horse slave. That's right, everyone can see clearly that we were far from winning that round. Jiang Xingjin became more and more angry and vented all his rage on the horsewhip. Gu Zhiyi was able to block at first, but gradually he was no longer able to dodge, and his back was covered with whip marks. When Jiang Shenliang, Zhang's cousin, hurried over, Gu Zhiyi was only breathing his last. 05. Jiang Shenliang's head was about to explode. It was fine that his sister was ignorant of the situation in the mansion, but how could she dare to make such a big fuss on an occasion like today? Now, I don't know how many noble ladies have seen this. Not only will it affect their sisters' marriages, but even the men's marriages will be affected. The young lady might be having a hysterical attack. Why don't you help her back quickly? With so many people watching, even if he wanted to put the blame on Gu Zhiyi, it was probably too late. Jiang Xingjin didn't appreciate it. You are the one who is hysterical. It's obviously Gu Zhiyi's fault. He is just a horse slave, so he deserves to be beaten to death. She waved her hand and whipped me again. I had already noticed that Lu had returned behind me silently, so I kept an eye on her. Sure enough, she was trying to reach out when no one was paying attention. I handed the hairpin in my hand to the ladies who wanted to see the jackpot and turned sideways. Ah. Lu had already fallen on Gu Zhiyi and was whipped. Gu Zhiyi groaned and was woken up by the impact. Everyone was stunned, and I took the opportunity to get angry. It's okay for my cousin to hit her own servants, but why did she hit my girl too? Jiang Xingjin was already in the mood to go against others, and now he is used to going against me. You obviously stole this girl from me. Her indenture is still in the Jiang family. She is also my servant, so why can't I hit her? I pretended to be so angry that tears welled up in my eyes. Since my cousin said so, I will return this girl to you. I am also stupid. I robbed her, but didn't get her indenture. I let her eat the share of my maid for nothing. The ladies around me had long been fed up with her arrogance, so they came up to comfort me and pulled me away from this place of trouble. I was secretly delighted in my heart, as I had gotten rid of 2 troublemakers who were greedy for money. How great it was! But unexpectedly, just as she was about to leave, a hand grabbed her skirt. Ayun, save me. Take me away? Please. I turned around and saw the blood-stained thin wrist imprinted on the hem of my skirt, and my face suddenly turned cold. He turned his head to look at the noble lady next to him who had just finished performing a sword dance. Please lend me your sword. 06. The sharp sword made a sword flower in my hand and cut off the piece of dress along Gu Zhiyi's finger bones. Before he could react, the tip of the cold sword was already against the back of his neck. I sneered. My cousin is such a valiant slave that she dares to call me by my given name and pull at my dress. Is she taking advantage of me because I have no one to rely on and dares to destroy my reputation like this? Jiang Xingjin seemed to have caught me and snorted. Why are you so angry? Maybe you did something shameful and want to kill me to silence me. Ayun, you call me so affectionately. You'll have to ask my cousin about that. None of my business. If my cousin hadn't had this horse slave serve her wherever she went these years, how would he know the name of the young lady? After all, when the women are together, there is no need to be shy about addressing each other by name. If he were to be accused of such a simple exchange of words, I would have no choice but to become a nun in order to save the family's reputation. That was such an unexpected disaster. The ladies around saw and heard the way Gu Zhiyi called me by my nickname. Rather than making a big deal out of it and leaving it for others to make assumptions, it would be better to make a big fuss and resolve it openly. The disaster affected them, and the noble ladies present all changed their expressions and looked at Jiang Xingjin with unfriendly eyes. In my previous life, I was involved in a scandal where I took the beating for a horse slave, but no one cared about Jiang Xingjin, the instigator who beat his own cousin. She even gained a good reputation because she generously gave Gu Zhiyi to me. People praised her for being straightforward and honest. She said that she had abused Gu Zhiyi in the past just to prevent me from being seduced by a horse slave. Unlike me, I have no sense of shame. I am willing to be a lowly person, and I had an affair with a horse slave while still in the room. Jiang Xingjin spoke up for me instead. I would rather tear down 10 temples than ruin a marriage. I didn't know my cousin was so devoted to her lover that she would risk her life to protect him. Now I think I shouldn't have stopped her. After all, my cousin is the only daughter of Marquis Huining. She is more confident than us. It's up to her to choose a husband. Why would she listen to outsiders like us? As a result, the Huining Marquis was criticized for having a bad family tradition, and I was also labeled an ungrateful person who didn't know how to appreciate good people. Now that there is a precedent of me being raped, it concerns my reputation, and there is no need for me to explain further. These ladies will take action on their own. 07. It was she who was inseparable from the slave girl. We all saw who did the shameful thing. Do you really think that others are blind? I find it strange. The son of the Gu family was not reduced to slavery, so why would he willingly stoop to sell himself as a slave in the Jiang mansion? Yeah, what on earth is there in the Jiang family that is worthy of him giving up his clean white body and degrading himself into a prostitute? What else can I say? Isn't it obvious? Even if I have to be your slave or dog, I will still follow you, my beautiful wife. Jiang Xingjin's face flushed red. He knew that the other party was being treacherous, but he had no way to refute them because what they said was true. She snorted coldly. If you don't believe me, just ask Gu Zhiyi yourself. See if our pure and innocent cousin has shown him concern and sent him soup and medicine. I said softly, "This is my cousin's man. If he has any injuries or illnesses, he will naturally come to you for medicine. Why should I make such a fuss and cause people to talk about me for nothing? The servants in the house are not dead. Since the news has reached my cousin, I believe many people must have known about it. If you have really heard any rumors, please bring out solid evidence. Even if you find anything related to me from him, I will commit suicide to thank my grandmother for her hard work in raising me." Jiang Xingjin was confused. She knew, of course, that she couldn't find anything from Gu Zhiyi. She only blamed herself for being too stupid in the past. She had taken away all the things I gave to Gu Zhiyi and destroyed them beyond recognition, even smashing the medicine bottles into pieces. With Shi Lu as my spy, she would inform everyone immediately after I delivered the things. I'm afraid she knows what I delivered better than Gu Zhiyi, and nothing would be missed. Such a groundless thing was used to force her own cousin to commit suicide to prove her integrity, and others looked at her with even more contempt. How many truths can such a biting servant say? He has trespassed into the place where the family members are and offended the nobles. This is a crime of disrespect. It is better to kill him on the spot to prevent future troubles. Jiang Xingjin said angrily, "Even if he hit someone, it's not someone else. What does my family's affairs have to do with you? You beat and kill him without even letting him talk. How domineering." I chuckled and raised the tip of my sword. "Okay, let him speak. I will give him a chance to defend himself so that he won't die unjustly." The people around me all looked at me with disapproval. Someone pulled me aside and said, "You are stupid. If he is really a lunatic, even if you kill 1,000 enemies, you will only lose 800 of your own lives. If you want to die together, you must have the determination to die. But I know that Gu Zhiyi cherishes his life the most. After all, he was shouldering the heavy responsibility of restoring the Gu family's glory, and how could he bear to die so easily before he could seize power? Tell me yourself, have you ever had any connection with me?" Gu Zhiyi looked at me deeply, then knocked his head heavily to the ground. The sound sounded like crying blood. "From never." Never. 08. Jiang Xingjin was still hoping that this good dog would satisfy her as usual, but she didn't expect that he would slap her in the face in public. You're calling me so affectionately, and you're saying you've never had any contact with each other? Then why did you ask her to save you? Where did you get those top-grade medicines and cold-repelling items in your room? I saw Shilu walk out of your room with my own eyes, and you still want to hide it. Gu Zhiyi lowered his head and cleared himself completely. My cousin is kind-hearted and well known for her kindness to servants. That's why I dared to ask her for help. I didn't mean to pry into her when I said the offensive words. It was just that when the old lady was taking my cousin to Qiushan Temple to burn incense and needed a horse, I forgot her name. When my life was at stake, I forgot the hierarchy. It's my fault. I will leave it to my cousin to deal with. Those medicines and things to keep warm were sent by my closest relatives. I just happened to meet this Miss Shilu, so I asked her to bring them to me. Jiang Xingjin was adamant. How can such a coincidence happen in this world? Your family is so poor that you can't even afford porridge and rice. Where did you get the money to buy these things? You are so protective of my cousin in your words that I can't tell whose slave you are. Gu Zhiyi glanced at her and said slowly, the token that allows you to enter and leave the mansion freely is only owned by the young ladies in charge of each master. The family couldn't afford it, so we had no choice but to pawn our last valuable jade pendant, which was a token of engagement. Originally, there was a pair of them, engraved with the family backgrounds of both parties. The one representing the Gu family was broken when the engagement was cancelled, and the remaining one was kept at home. Now I have no choice but to pawn it. I just hope that no one will find it, and it will become a stumbling block for the woman's marriage. After all, Gu Zhiyi was once the most famous young master in the capital, so his words were well-reasoned and convincing. He was also born with a good-looking complexion, and his injuries only added a kind of sad beauty to him, like fallen leaves in the autumn wind. The expression of emotion was neither humble nor arrogant, and was quite dignified, which softened people's hearts. That woman is heartless, but he is loyal. Even after being rejected, he still wanted to avoid delaying the other party's marriage. If it were me, I would make it known to everyone to see which family did such a treacherous thing. 09. Didn't he tell you that? Are you going to pin this dirty water on your cousin? Marquis Huining has been away at war for 6 years and has not returned. He had no choice but to entrust Miss Wei to her maternal family. If he knew that his only daughter was being bullied like this, he would be heartbroken. However, the Jiang siblings' faces changed drastically after hearing what Gu Zhiyi said. Jiang Shengliang suddenly raised his hand and slapped Jiang Xingjin, scolding him. Your family has corrupted your habits and cultivated your competitive temper. You only care about the momentary pleasure of talking, and you don't even care about your own flesh and blood. Why don't you apologize to your cousin? Jiang Xingjin was no longer as aggressive as before and apologized through gritted teeth. I lost my mind. I hope my cousin will forgive me. Jiang Shengliang bowed again and apologized. This slave deserves death, but today is a royal event, so blood should not be shed. I guarantee in the name of the Jiang family that before he dares to say a word about you, he will become a useless person who can neither speak nor write. Since he has offended my cousin, how about bringing him back home and letting my cousin deal with him? I chuckled. Let my cousin decide. I am soft-hearted and cannot bear to punish him too severely. If the punishment is too light, I am afraid that the Jiang family will lose its prestige. Jiang Shengliang gritted his teeth and said, I will cut the tendons of the hand that soiled my cousin's skirt. Oh, it happens to be the right hand that writes. Gu Zhiyi was once known as an expert in both calligraphy and painting, and every word he wrote was worth 1,000 gold coins. But now he can't even lift a pen. What should he do? Jiang Shengliang carried the man out. It was inconvenient for him to stay here any longer, so he left in a hurry. Jiang Xingjin was the only one left standing there. I finally focused and looked at Shilu, whose hands were covered in blood. In my previous life, I saw a whip coming at me, and I leaned to the side to block it. Although I was wounded on my face, it was only on the side that I was hurt. Someone sighed and called me Half-Face Lotus. But Shi Lu failed to harm anyone as she was completely unprepared, and her pretty face almost went head-on into the whip. The whip marks slanted across her entire face, almost hurting her eyes. I looked at her with pity and said, "How could you be so careless? We are a master and servant. If you need a good doctor, just come to me." Jiang Xingjin smiled with a fake smile. "Don't worry about it, cousin. You also said that if my servant has any injuries or illnesses, he will ask me for medicine." Shi Lu was in so much pain that she felt numb. She shuddered when she heard that. I turned and left. Shi Lu had received too few beatings. There would always be more provocations. I just don't know if she will still be as loyal to Jiang Xingjin as she was in her previous life after her face was ruined in this life.
10.
When the polo match ended, all the Jiang family's carriages and horses had left. I almost laughed out loud. Which genius came up with such a good idea? Did he really think I would walk back? I pretended to be anxious and looked around, but there was not even a personal maid by my side. I was standing there all alone, attracting great attention. Whenever someone asked me, I told them the truth. Many ladies and noble ladies I knew offered to give me a ride, but I politely declined. My cousin won't abandon me. She must have something important to do and will come back to pick me up later. Later, when the number of carriages and horses gradually decreased, I planned to randomly seize a carriage and sell it at a low price, so as to further ruin the Jiang family's reputation. But I didn't expect that a luxuriously decorated carriage would suddenly stop in front of me. The curtain opened, and a graceful woman looked into my eyes. "Isn't this Lan Yun? Why are you standing here alone?" Princess Yunnan, the mistress of the family that Jiang Xingjin married into in his previous life. This is also a wonderful person. In her previous life, she had already arranged a marriage with my grandmother, and they had even exchanged engagement letters, and I was destined to be the crown prince's consort. As a result, such an incident happened, but the Jiang family announced at this time that they had been engaged to the Yunnan palace. This matter had originally been circulated among the noble ladies, so this confirmed the marriage. It's not impossible to dispel the rumor, but I can't help but explain it and put myself in the spotlight. Unexpectedly, the princess actually accepted the marriage and proposed with a smile on her face. It was not until Jiang Xingjin married into the palace that she found out that the man she was marrying was not the prince, but an unknown bastard of the Yunnan palace. Since the Jiang family dared to steal the dragon and replace it with a phoenix, the Yunnan palace could naturally exchange the fish eyes for the pearl. This illegitimate son has a bad character and poor ability. He blames his inability to make a name for himself on the lack of support from his good in-laws. Even though his uncle was already a Shengshileng, the chief official at that time, he still felt it was too low a position and blamed Jiang Xingjin for interfering with his chance of marrying a princess. Jiang Xingjin's life was naturally not easy. 10 years later, the impoverished Ma slave who had broken off the engagement became the prime minister of the dynasty and forced Prince Yunnan to divorce his wife. Then he married her back with a beautiful makeup. 11. When I returned home, my grandmother had a sad face and was looking forward to seeing me. The eldest aunt embraced Jiang Xingjin indifferently and said mockingly, "Look, even if there is no carriage, she still came back, right? I told you not to go to great lengths to look for her. It's not like the cousin has no legs and can't walk by herself. Mother, don't make a fuss about it. Our Jeaner is the one who has suffered the greatest injustice. It is our cousin who, at such a young age, has actually learned to huddle together to squeeze people out. The Jiang family's temple is still too small to accommodate a large Buddha like the only daughter of Marquis Huining." Before I could say anything, Princess Yunnan came in seductively. "How much injustice has she suffered?
Tell me about it."
How could this girl Lan Yun have such a great ability? I will punish her severely on behalf of her mother." I smiled and said, "Although I was alone, the princess was kind enough to give me a ride. Otherwise, I would have to walk back on my own 2 feet, as my aunt said." The eldest aunt bowed in fear and said, "I didn't know the princess was coming. I'm sorry for not coming to greet you." Princess Yunnan ignored her and took her grandmother's hand affectionately. "Teacher, how are you these days? I came here so suddenly. It's really rude to come to see you empty-handed." Grandmother looked at her kindly and said, "You bringing Lanyan back to me is the best gift I have ever received." My grandmother was a female tutor in a private school in the capital. She did not teach women virtues or precepts, but only the 4 books and 5 classics. Now, many noble ladies in the capital were her students. For a long time, the doorsteps of the homes of the students she taught would be broken down by matchmakers. Until she wanted to allow girls to take the imperial examinations and enter officialdom so that they could establish their own families, her school became deserted. My grandmother was disheartened and got married soon because her wild imagination led to her losing her moral character. Even though her family was prominent, she only married a poor man. Princess Yunnan was also her student, the only student who came to study after she got married, and was a classmate of my mother. Later, both of my grandmother's students married into noble families. Many people wanted to invite her to reopen the private school, but she refused to accept another student. The princess spent as much time reminiscing with her grandmother as her aunt-in-law was performing her formalities. It was not until Jiang Xingjin could no longer hold on and fell to the ground that the princess suddenly seemed to realize that there was a group of people still performing formalities and raised her hand to ask them to stand up. Ms. Jiang was so brave and powerful at the polo match, but how come she fell down when she was doing the greetings at home? She was more delicate than others. She was not used to the stable boys in the palace and had to bring her own horse slaves. I guess the servants in the Jiang family were more satisfying than those in the palace. My aunt's face turned pale, and she quickly said she didn't dare. Don't dare? What is there for you Jiang family not to dare? They can even abandon the daughter of the marquise. Madame Jiang and Miss Jiang are really mother and daughter. The daughter framed her cousin for having an affair with a horse slave, and the mother wanted a girl to show her face in public and walk around the streets. Well, since you said the Jiang family temple is too small, why don't you just agree to the 2 children's matter today, so that I can move this big Buddha to my home soon?
12.
The grandmother finally refused to give in, and Princess Yunnan left with a resentful look on her face. Rumors in the capital spread much faster than expected. By the time the aunt-in-law reacted, the news had spread throughout the capital. The eldest daughter of the Jiang family was domineering and eccentric. One day, she seriously injured 2 slaves and threw the daughter of the marquis's mansion who was staying at home to the polo game and left. Jiang Xingjin was just the right age for marriage, not to mention that the polo club had tacitly agreed to see each other that day, and the servants coming in and out behind the pearl curtain were the eyes and ears of many nobles. Rumors are like tigers, but they are not groundless. Overnight, several aunts avoided the first wife's house like the plague, saying that Jiang Xingjin should either get married or become a nun, or they would split up the family. Seeing that the family that had just begun to prosper was about to fall apart and decline, the first wife and her husband had a big quarrel and had to hastily arrange a marriage for Jiang Xingjin. But after such a thing happened, it was inevitable to negotiate with whom to marry, and it was impossible to find a suitable family in a short period of time. The eldest aunt wanted to pick one from her mother's family, but her mother's family was not going to let her down. Although they were extremely cold, she still gave them generous gifts. Only then did her sister-in-law give in and tell her the real story. The rumor actually did not ruin Jiang Xingjin's reputation to the point where he could not get married. The real reason was that Jiang Xingjin secretly brought a man outside his family and colliding with his wife. This man outside his family was a lowly horse slave who was involved in treason, and she also had an unclear relationship with this horse slave. The noble ladies were related and would tell each other stories. If a daughter was wronged, she would complain to her mother. In order to preserve the reputation of the ladies, although this incident was concealed, the police took advantage of Jiang Xingjin's immoral behavior at the polo club and spared no effort to dig out the past of Jiang Xingjin and Gu Zhiyi's unlimited intimacy. Tell me, which family would let a woman who has an affair with a horse slave into the house? Isn't that asking for a life of shame? If you marry her, the family's reputation will be tarnished. Sister, you'd better not bring trouble to a good family. Pick a family you trust and marry your children to. It's best if you marry her far away. This is a last resort. Unless it is absolutely necessary, How can my aunt be willing to marry her beloved daughter to a slave? However, I have close ties with the Prince of Yunnan's palace, and the marriage is almost a done deal, except for my father to return to the capital to conclude the marriage. Prince Yunnan is a prince of a different surname who has inherited the throne from generation to generation and holds a high position. When the crown prince Yan Pei inherits the title, I will be the princess of a super-ranking prince. We were both in our prime years, ready to get married, but I married into a royal palace, moving up a notch, from a noble family to a royal relative, while Jiang Xingjin couldn't even find a good family to marry into, and my eldest aunt was so anxious that she started praying to the gods. Jiang Xingjin had a very hard time these days. She was nominally waiting to be married, but in reality she was under house arrest and could not leave the house. She could only torture her servants even more severely. Shi Lu suffered the most miserable fate because she had served me. She was forced to kneel in a busy corridor every day and had to look up so that everyone could see the scar that had become horrible and ugly because she did not receive timely medical treatment. 13. That night, Exile, he whispered in my ear. Miss, Shi Lu sent a message saying that Miss Jiang changed into servant's clothes and secretly went to the stable. Xinhe was brought from the Marquis mansion and grew up with me. She is loyal but a little dull. In my previous life, the entire Wei family was killed, and I was divorced and became an abandoned woman. Gu Zhiyi still refused to let me go. He cut my leg tendons and imprisoned me in a stable, leaving Jiang Xingjin to bully me at will. Jiang Xingjin had been beaten, scolded, and neglected by the bastard of the palace for 10 years, and he hated me so much that, in order to humiliate me, he threw the new lotus as a reward to the servants to humiliate me and locked me in the woodshed separated by a wall. I only said that men are not allowed to touch you, but I am angry, so I will let you take the blame. Who told you to fall to this point and still seduce men to keep thinking about you? This is the result. Shi Lu followed her and looked at me with pity before leaving. If I had been loyal to you, this would be the fate today. Cherish the time you can still hear her voice now. Tomorrow morning, she will be sold to the lowest kiln. I almost dug my hands into the wall and stared at her. Why? Shi Lu's eyes revealed some hatred. When the madam threatened me with my bond, she also said that she would sell me to the lowest kiln. I have been worried all these years. Others maids who came with their dowries were all concubines of their aunts, but I just moved to another place to be a slave. You just saved me, but you didn't think about what to do next for me. Why should I be asked to repay you for your kindness? I didn't pay attention to the personal indenture because there was no such thing as a personal indenture in the whining Marquis mansion. All the people in the mansion were old, weak, sick, and disabled personal soldiers and their dependents. But if she had mentioned a word to me over the years, I would have been able to get a maid's indenture. With my status, I could have easily gotten her a brand new indenture. She cannot be exploited for her kindness, but she can bow to the most vicious threat and become a mine buried by my side. Actually, now it seems that the bond is not as important as her appearance. That night I didn't hear Xinhe's voice, only disgusting dirty words. The woodshed was empty, and the walls were covered with blood-red fingerprints. The nails on my 10 fingers fell off, revealing the white stumps of bones. Shi Lu said that Exile, he bit her tongue so hard that it was broken in order to prevent herself from making any sound. After being humiliated all night, she still had the strength to break free from the grip of 2 big men and escape. It seems that she is not so loyal as to die for you. Only I know that her father was my father's personal soldier. After my father was seriously injured and disabled, he continued to serve as a soldier in the whining Marquis mansion. His daughter would never be afraid of death. I just suddenly felt heartbroken again. Xinhe was in a martial arts competition, and she had the ability to resist, but I didn't even hear any struggle last night. She did it to preserve her strength. I wish she was running away for herself. Run away, Xinhe, not for me, but for yourself. But it was just for me. Miss, the tea is cold. I pulled myself away from that extremely painful memory and put down the cup. Send her some wound medicine tomorrow, add some facial cream, and have someone pretend to be a peddler and sell it outside the mansion. When she asks for it the second time, make sure to let Jiang Xingjin know. Every evildoer will receive his due punishment. Now I'm going to go and grind the bad guys first. 14. In the woodshed outside the stable, Jiang Xingjin, dressed in the clothes of a low-class maid, was questioning Gu Zhiyi with a whip in hand. You are really a dog that bites but doesn't bark. You actually held back. Now there are rumors all over the place. It must be that the half of the jade pendant that you had secretly got out. Which pawn shop did you pawn your jade pendant to? I've searched all the pawn shops in Beijing and still can't find it. Gu Ziyi's right hand hung weakly. Although his face looked cold, he looked in good spirits. Jiang Shenliang had questioned him a lot these days and even wanted to torture him to extract a confession, but he was no longer the gloomy and silent boy. After years of ups and downs in officialdom, it was easy for him to control a young official. He even turned the tables and forced Jiang Shenliang to seek medical treatment for him. Even the severed tendons in his hands were reconnected, but he couldn't exert much strength afterwards. His hands would shake if he exerted the slightest force, and writing or painting was even more of a fantasy. Seeing that Gu Zhiyi didn't answer, Jiang Xingjin threw the whip instead. Do you like me so much? You still hold on to the engagement token even after the engagement was cancelled. If you tell me where the jade pendant is, I can consider giving you some sweet treats. How about it? Gu Zhiyi finally responded. Tell me about it. Jiang Xingjin smiled charmingly and was a little proud. Whatever you want, I will satisfy you, but the prerequisite is that you must get the jade pendant first. She still thought that the rumor started with Yujue, and as long as no one else got the real thing, everything would be fine. Gu Zhiyi was a stubborn person, except for the beauty trap, which he had never used before. Now, Miss Jiang condescended to offer herself as bait, and the other party really took the bait. It's just that he was attracted by her beauty. I need to collect some interest first, otherwise why should I trust you? Take off your clothes. Jiang Xingjin tightened his collar, swallowed, and almost cursed out loud. Gu Zhiyi sneered. I am seriously injured, and my right hand is broken. What can I do to you? I just want to see the sincerity of the young lady. It seems that the young lady is not sincere. Jiang Xingjin's cheeks flushed, but he finally loosened his hands and took off his clothes piece by piece. Clothes were thin in spring, so he was stripped to bare clothes after just a few pieces, revealing his fair arms, calves, and neck. She looked at Gu Zhiyi's expression and saw that he was still looking at her with unsatisfied look. She took off her shirt without hesitation and only wore a tight belly band. A chill spread, she crossed her arms, tears falling from her eyes in shame. Do you really want to bully me to death? Gu Zhiyi picked up a piece of clothing and put it on her shoulders. Jiang Xingjin was delighted. After all, he couldn't bear to make things difficult for himself. Even when Gu Zhiyi moved closer and closer to her ear, she did not resist, and her face actually felt a little hot. She thought that if Gu Zhiyi had achieved great success, she would not be unwilling to marry him. After all, her reputation would be ruined by him, and he would not care. But Gu Zhiyi's next words made her feel like she was falling into an icy cave. Gu Zhiyi said frivolously, Young miss, your body is no different from other women. I thought you were so special, but now it seems you are just an ordinary woman. You look so despicable now. 15. Jiang Xingjin was both ashamed and angry, and looked at Gu Zhiyi in disbelief. His eyes were cold and deep, carrying the pressure of someone who had been in a superior position for a long time, which actually made her a little scared. I was standing outside the door, and when I saw them looking at each other so affectionately, I kicked the door open. I joked, Does this count as catching an adulterer in bed? Jiang Xingjin screamed, hurriedly put on 2 pieces of clothes, and hid behind Zhiyi, without caring about the humiliation he had just suffered. Get out. I pressed closer and closer. So my cousin was engaged to a slave boy. Oh, I almost forgot that this slave boy was once the #1 prince. You were the one who had an affair with him, but you were so cruel that you wanted to hurt me to frame your cousin and ex-fiancé. What did I do wrong to make my cousin hate me so much? Let me guess, it's because the Yunnan Palace is negotiating a marriage with my grandmother, and I am a good match for the palace, and I have a childhood sweetheart relationship with the prince. You and the slave's previous engagement cannot be known to anyone. Why not just set up this vicious plan and kill two birds with one stone? After saying that, I pushed Gu Zhiyi away and slapped Jiang Xingjin twice. How dare you hit me? I find the shrill female voice extremely pleasing to the ear.
Hark!
This is the cry of the dying nightingale. I wiped my hands slowly and said, I'll hit you if you want to.
What can you do to me?
I have respected you as my elder sister all these years. In order not to make things difficult for my grandmother, I will give in to you no matter how you provoke or bully me. Have you really forgotten that I am the only child of Marquis Huining, and now I am the future crown prince consort of Prince Yunnan's palace? Is there anything wrong with beating you? Jiang Xingjin was so angry that he even snatched the whip he had just thrown down and wanted to whip me. You bastard! My family has raised you with good food and drink for so many years, but you turned out to be an ungrateful person. They say that the grace of raising a child is greater than the grace of giving birth. I will teach you a lesson today. The whip seems to be waving with great force, but an expert can tell at a glance that it is weak and powerless. I reached out and grabbed the whip, turned my wrist, and the whip slipped from her hand and into my palm. Cousin, you may not know this, but my father entrusted me to my grandmother to be raised because he only knew how to teach me martial arts, hoping that my grandmother could make me more gentle and stable. I swung the whip at her body, focusing on the places where the flesh was thick and the pain was strongest. It seemed to fall lightly on her, but in fact it had an internal force that would cause her continuous pain and extreme numbness in the later stages, which was enough to make her uncomfortable for more than a month. Jiang Xingjin screamed in surprise, thinking that Gu Zhiyi was the dog that obeyed her in the past, and shouted at him to stop me. Cousin, just keep yelling. It would be better to call everyone to come and see that the young lady is in a disheveled state and is cuddling with a slave. When I turned my head, I saw Gu Zhiyi hiding aside, not daring to confront me. He looked at me with burning eyes, and there was a smile on his face that looked like spring breeze melting snow. Your smile is too cheesy. Then he was given a few whippings. Anyway, I'm here to vent my anger today.
16.
Jiang Xingjin stayed indoors for a while. He didn't know how many medicines he took before he felt better. He lost a lot of weight. There was only one whip mark on the neck, which was particularly eye-catching and would definitely leave a scar. She tried many scar removal methods, but to no avail. She could only wrap a scarf around her neck. When Shi Lu went to get the medicine for the second time, she was bumped into by the girl next to Jiang Xingjin. After using the first bottle of facial cream, the scars on Shi Lu's face became visibly smaller. Even deep scars on her face could be healed, so healing Jiang Xingjin's minor wounds was naturally no problem. Jiang Xingjin exchanged Shi Lu's facial cream for his own useless scar removal medicine. The medicine is of course effective. In my previous life, I was very concerned about the scar on my face. I spent years studying this, looking for famous doctors, and using all the power of the Marquis and the Prime Minister to finally make the whip mark on my face fade away. It was not just a whip mark, but also a symbol of evidence of the private transaction between me and the horse slave, a shame that penetrated deep into my bones. Later, in order to get revenge on me, Jiang Xingjin carved the words "slave wife" on my face with a knife and sprinkled quicklime on the wound. The burning and bleeding scars could not be healed even by magic pills. Do you think that now that the scar on your face has disappeared, you are qualified to be the Prime Minister's wife? Now the scar will never disappear. You are only fit to be the wife of a lowly horse slave. The word wife is complicated, and the knife and pen dig into the flesh. It really hurts. So I returned the favor with a facial cream mixed with toxic lead powder and datura flowers. It not only removes scars but also whitens the skin. It becomes addictive after long-term use. The failed samples from the previous life have now been put to good use. The ointment was taken away from Shi Lu, and soon news came that her aunt actually intended to marry Jiang Xingjin to Gu Zhiyi. My uncle almost thought she was giving up, but my aunt said it was the guidance of a fairy. The immortals said that the hidden dragon is in the abyss, and the son-in-law is in the mansion. Once he is born, he will soar into the sky and surpass all others. It was worth it for her to pray to the gods and give away so much money. She really got what she wanted. At first, she didn't believe it. After all, people who pray to gods only want to hear what they want to hear. How could they really believe such nonsense that a horse slave could become the prime minister? But the immortal revealed two secrets in succession. One was that the second elder in the mansion would have a disaster, and the other was that the royal harem would be in turmoil because of foreign relatives. Within 3 days, the second house was in chaos. The second uncle was in debt from gambling, and the casino came to the house and forced the eldest uncle, who was a minister, to pay back the money. A few days later, the king's uncle tried to rob a woman but failed, so he beat her to death in the street. The woman's family reported the incident to Shuntian Prefecture, and everyone was furious. The emperor was furious and demoted the concubine to a noble lady and confined her to the palace. The emperor's brother-in-law was exiled 1,000 miles away. Even my second aunt didn't know about my second uncle's gambling, and the affairs of the royal family were beyond human control. Now the couple believed it completely, but they couldn't act too abnormally on the surface, so they only asked Jiang Xingjin to maintain their relationship in private. After all, my uncle is an official. It won't be too late to talk about marriage when Gu Zhiyi shows his potential. If he needs support, he can't be considered a latent talent. 17. When the news of my father's return to the capital spread to the capital, the Jiang family was in a state of excitement. It turned out that the horse slave, who was at the center of the rumor, was really no ordinary person. When he was grazing horses in the suburbs, he happened to save the third prince who was returning to the capital to report on his work. With his talent, he was appreciated by the third prince. Not only was he freed from slavery, but he was also regarded as the prince's confidant and rose to prominence. Gu Zhiyi was riding a tall horse, dressed in fancy clothes, as if the most powerful young master in the capital had returned again. Everyone knows that the eldest prince and the crown prince were fighting for power, and the brothers were quarreling with each other, which displeased the emperor, and now they are both sitting on the bench. Without the two in front blocking him, the third prince became very popular. If he could really accomplish something, wouldn't Gu Zhiyi be a potential close minister? There is a bright future ahead. There was a lot of noise outside, but my grandmother just hugged me and told me many things to do after I got married. Your mother passed away early, and Princess Yunnan is my last disciple. This is the best path that your grandmother can plan for you. Everyone envies marrying into a rich family, but if you are wronged in the future, I'm afraid there will be no one to support you. I only hope that I can live a few more years, and the princess will give me some face and treat you well. But, Grandma, I never agreed to this marriage from the beginning to the end. If I had the chance to do it all over again, marrying into a royal palace would be my best outcome. I might as well die. If one day the Jiang family can no longer be relied upon, are you willing to live in the Marquis mansion? Grandmother shook her head. I have a dowry, and I can support myself. What if my uncles are in trouble? Then let them fend for themselves, useless creatures. Leaving my grandmother's courtyard, I watched the servants running around, all of them wanting to witness the elegance of the former number 1 young master. Gu Zhiyi has been the prime minister for 10 years, but he still doesn't have the patience to start over again. Without my help in this life, he will have to find another way. I muttered to myself, without fame, without background, there is no place to display my talent. All that remains are the memories of the prophet. But this is the most unreliable. In his previous life, the third prince was assassinated and returned to the capital injured, which completely pushed the first prince and the crown prince to destruction and also aroused your majesty's jealousy. But Gu Zhiyi had saved the third prince, and now public opinion in the capital was leaning towards him, with all the ministers rushing to curry his favor. Wasn't this telling everyone clearly that the throne of heir apparent would belong to the third prince? People who play chess should avoid changing the chess pieces without authorization. If one word is wrong, the whole game will be lost. But I have already set a trap to lure you into it. My second uncle deceives his superiors and keeps his subordinates in the gambling business. All I need to do is team up with a banker to set a trap, and he will fall into it. After the deal is done, we can split the profits 40% and 60% respectively. Why not? The royal concubine's murder of the crown prince had already displeased the emperor and the empress dowager, who were just taking advantage of the king's uncle's mistake to vent their anger. The first official in charge of the case was none other than Prince Yanpei, the Prince of Yunnan, who only transferred the case to Shantian Prefecture after the incident became a big deal. There is no such thing as immortal guidance, it is just that man can conquer nature.
18.
The Jiang family held a grand banquet to entertain Gu Zhiyi, and the other families were also in great joy and never mentioned the matter of dividing the family. Things are different nowadays. The target of the rumor is very important. There is a world of difference between a horse slave and the prince's confidant, even if they are the same person. The latter has already reached the center of power and is a person of great luck. Compared with him, those who have worked hard for many years to pass the imperial examination seem to be looked down upon. My aunt asked Jiang Xingjin to take the lead in hosting the banquet today. Jiang Xingjin did not fail in his mission, pouring wine and serving dishes, behaving gracefully and appropriately, and acting like a host. Everyone would praise him. My daughter has grown up. I left the table to get some fresh air, with a burning gaze following me all the way until I reached a quiet spot in the garden, with a smell of alcohol lingering around me. Ayun, you were also reborn, right? That's great. God has given us a chance to start over. In this life, I can finally ask you to marry me. I looked annoyed at first, but when I heard that I burst into laughter. Why? You were killed by me once, and now you want to do it a second time? In the previous life, he was lured and killed by me, and he still hasn't changed his bad habits this time. Gu Zhiyi's expression changed for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. One life and one hand. In exchange for us starting over, it's worth it. I will marry you as my concubine with the ceremony of a wife. As long as your father-in-law is willing to join the third prince's camp, hand over the military power after the success, and return to the fields, he will no longer be jealous of you and me. When the third prince ascends the throne, I will ask for a title and decree for you, and guarantee that you will be more honorable and glorious than the wife. You don't need to work hard for me in this life. Just sit back and enjoy the glory and wealth. I resisted the urge to kill him right away and asked, "Who is the legal wife?" He looked at me with a hint of apology. The legal wife is the product of an alliance. No matter who the other party is, she can only get a nominal position. My only lover will only be you. Ah Yun, you are proficient in the art of manipulation. You can understand me, right? It was the same in his previous life. Jiang Xingjin was his obsession when he was young, but once he succeeded, his cinnabar mole became like mosquito blood. He regretted it after not cherishing her for a few years. How could an abandoned woman who was of no help to him be worthy of occupying the position of his legal wife? I didn't answer. I have already made an engagement with Prince Yunnan. How can you marry me? You are just the king of Yunnan. In my previous life, I was able to get Jiang Xingjin divorced. Naturally, I can get you in this life. Yan Pei has not yet settled the vengeance of using his military merit to buy you. Do you know how much I regret letting you go? Only after you left me did I know what love is. Even if your face is ruined, I will still love you. Let go. Exile, he risked his life to deliver the Wei family's military tactics to Yan Pei and tried every means to get in touch with me. 3 years later, Yan Pei returned victoriously and offered to exchange my military power and achievements for me. However, Gu Zhiyi said that I had died long ago, and there was no such person as Wei Lanyun in the mansion. I endured for 3 years and tamed every wild horse. On the day I received the signal, I let all the horses go to create chaos, tied myself tightly to the belly of the most spiritual precious horse, avoided the rain of guns and swords, and finally saw the light again. I planned my escape with great effort, and he said that he let me go. How ridiculous. What about my cousin? What are you going to do with her in this life? Gu Zhiyi thought for a long time. She got lost in Xiangshan Temple when she was young. She was pitiful and polite. My family suffered a sudden change at that time, and she was also sad. I felt sorry for her, and she gave me a huge gift. Although she is domineering and bullies you, I don't like her. Considering our childhood friendship, I will only take her as my concubine, and she will always be your subordinate. Are you satisfied with this? Just at this moment, Jiang Xingjin came. The distinguished guest is not here, and the wine has been stopped. Daddy asked me to look for him. After Gu Zhiyi left, Jiang Xingjin leaned over and whispered in my ear.
What?
Are you regretting it now? Unfortunately, no matter how much you try to please me, it will be useless. When Ai becomes the prime minister, I will be a lady of the first rank. How can a palace that relies on the glory of its ancestors to survive compare to the prime minister of a high-ranking official? You won't be able to be so arrogant for long. I smiled and said, then I wish my cousin in advance to find a good husband and a happy marriage. Jiang Xingjin caught up with Gu Zhiyi and supported him, and he did not refuse. Exile, he came to me from the dark and said, the incense that the eldest lady bought has already been used, and the hangover soup in the eldest lady's courtyard has also been stewed and added with ingredients. I saw that the medicine was all ordinary stuff, so I helped them replace it with the official one. I guarantee that you can get it tonight. I laughed and said, when my aunt and I are getting married, I will be sorry for your kindness if I don't ask for more money as a reward. He dares to get drunk in a den of tigers and wolves. This is the kind of person who is set up as a trap. 19. The next morning, my grandmother woke me up from my quilt, helped me put on my clothes with a stern face, and instructed Xinhe to pack up. Pack your things and go back to the mansion. If anyone asks you about it, just tell them that your father is going back to the capital and we went back to arrange matters at the mansion. From time to time, the Jiang family's grandmother would come back and forth to report what had happened and tell us what had happened. It is said that Gu Zhiyi walked into the wrong yard after getting drunk and ended up in Jiang Xingjin's room. When Jiang Xingjin didn't come out until noon the next day, he thought she was unwell. But when he pushed the door open, he saw a disgusting scene. The first wife and her husband wanted to use the fact that they were already engaged as an excuse to go along with the situation and marry Jiang Xingjin to Gu Zhiyi. However, Gu Zhiyi refused to agree, saying that it was the Jiang family who broke off the engagement, and it was also the Jiang family who was setting up the plot now. Without the marriage certificate or keepsake, the engagement was invalid. You can ask him to take responsibility, but he can only be a concubine. Upon hearing this, my uncle became so angry that his face turned blue. He was a third-rank official, so how could his legitimate daughter become someone else's concubine? Gu Zhiyi refused to accept any soft or hard words and left in anger. The Jiang family was no pushover, and they redeemed a jade pendant from a pawnshop outside Beijing. It was the escaped jade that had not been destroyed. Jiang Xingjin was ill at the time, so she secretly invited a female doctor. Most likely she was pregnant. According to the laws of this dynasty, the engagement gift can be used as evidence that Gu Zhiyi broke the contract, and he can be appealed to Shantian Prefecture and be sued. The crime of abandoning his first wife was enough to make him disliked by the rigid and conservative Qinglu. The uncle used coercion and inducement, threatening Gu Zhiyi with his career as an official and promising a generous dowry. No matter how aggrieved Gu Zhiyi was, he had to agree to marry Jiang Xingjin. For this reason, Gu Zhiyi even waited at the place where people had to pass in and out of the mansion to explain it to me. There is no such thing as half a jade pendant. I made it up to deceive them. You and I are both reborn people. When have you ever seen me with a jade pendant? A yun. You must believe me. I didn't even lift the carriage curtain. Of course, I believe you. As long as you believe in me, it's worth it no matter how much injustice I suffer. Before he finished speaking, I laughed, because I sent someone to make the jade pendant based on your fabrication and sent it to the pawnshop. You and my cousin are an accomplice. You are a perfect match made in heaven. How can I bear to see you two lovers separated? I imitated his words that day in a weird way. I marry you as my concubine with the ceremony of my first wife. I take her as my concubine because of our childhood friendship. The position of first wife is just a product of marriage. That's only if you have the final say. You're a useless piece of shit. You'll only dream when you see the world.
20.
The day my father came back, I was a little dazed. My mind was full of my past life, the coup in the palace, and Gu Zhiyi tricking me into leaving Beijing and falsely sending my letter to ask my father for help. By that time, my father no longer had any military power, and the 100,000-strong Wei family army was disbanded and sent to various prefectures. But he still brought the soldiers from the whining Marquis's mansion who had retreated from the battlefield and were injured and sick to rescue me. What awaited him was a dense array of arrows and the emperor's final rage. The imperial decree ordered Gu Zhiyi to personally supervise the execution to prove his innocence, and as Gu Ziyi's wife, I was no longer considered a member of the Wei family. He still wrote me a divorce letter to make things clear. He said, "Your Majesty spared your life for my sake.
Don't blame me.
Who asked your father to commit treason?" The funny thing is, his father was also convicted of treason, and I was the one who destroyed the evidence for him. It's no longer important to talk about all this now, as everything will become a thing of the past with the emperor's death. Before my father was beheaded, I went to see him for the last time. He said, "I know my daughter would never beg in such a humble way, even from her own father. But I don't dare to bet on that. If it is really you, I really don't know how I will explain it to your mother in my grave. Lan Yun, stay alive. The Wei family army is still waiting for you to reunite them. No one can stand my father. When the country is at peace, there will be internal turmoil. When the birds are gone, the good bows are hidden. No matter who becomes the emperor, they will be jealous of my father. There is only one person who doesn't know how to do this, but she can't be the emperor. Now I just want to see how the emperor will make my father hand over his military power and how he will reward my father for his military merits now that I am no longer charged with being linked to the treacherous minister Gu Zhiyi. Perhaps Gu Zhiyi was stimulated by me, and based on his memories of his previous life, he kept offering strategies to the third prince. Floods in the south of the Yangtze River, severe drought in the northwest, bandit uprisings. It seemed that nothing in this world could not defeat him. The third prince also felt that he was talented and kept rewarding and valuing him. Gu Zhiyi's reputation spread quickly, and he had already shown the potential of a famous minister. Jiang Xingjin was also in the limelight, and his food, clothing, housing, and transportation were luxurious, and he was on par with the lady of the imperial court in every way. She even had the energy to come and show off to me with her slightly visible belly. Her marriage to Gu Zhiyi was extremely simple. Even the house they lived in and the car they traveled in were paid for by her eldest uncle. Now the investment has started to make a profit.
Why?
Your uncle has returned, but you and Prince Yunnan haven't settled the matter yet? Aren't some people still relying on their status as the future crown prince's wife? I noticed that Princess Yunnan has not visited you since you returned home. I advise you to get your man in your hands as soon as possible, otherwise who knows when it will fall through. There was no hostess at home to entertain, so in order to avoid suspicion, Princess Yunnan would naturally not come to the house and would just pick me up and leave. The weather was getting warmer. I saw that the whip marks on her neck had improved a lot, but they were still obvious. Since she became pregnant, I stopped supplying her with thin willow facial cream. Wait a while until she gives birth. Really? I'm afraid not. After you get married, you will have to go through the pain of having children. If you meet an unreasonable mother-in-law, you will suffer a lot. Jiang Xingjin's face froze. She always dressed up when she went out, but the thick makeup couldn't hide the haggardness in her eyes. No one knows better than me what kind of person Gu Zhiyi's mother is. She is an old witch who is full of dregs. I wasn't tortured, but my sisters-in-law suffered a lot. They felt like all the yang energy was sucked out of them. The Jiang family also broke off the engagement with the Gu family, leaving Gu Zhiyi as a horse slave at home for so many years. One can imagine how miserable Jiang Xingjin must have been. I straightened her collar with sadness. Cherish the fleeting good time now. Hold it high up, and it will be the heaviest and most painful when it falls. 21. The louder the calls were in the past, the stronger the backlash will be now. When Gu Ziyi's strategy was applied in practice, problems soon arose. At this time in his previous life, he was still preparing for a breakthrough. He had been a horse slave for many years, and what he had learned was no longer applicable to the present. I sent him to the Imperial College to study, so that he could enter the officialdom as a commoner, and then be sent to serve as an official in other places to accumulate political achievements. Therefore, he had never participated in the political affairs at this time in his previous life. When he began to be reused, the chief officials in various places in Jiangnan and northwest China had already made many political achievements, and the strategies proposed on this basis were only suitable for this situation. But the officer in charge of building the dikes in the Jiangnan waters has not yet taken office, and the conclusions that Gu Zhiyi has given are sufficient for military purposes on paper, but when applied in practice, they have caused the diversion of waterways and affected the villages and towns along the way. The emperor had always felt that the third prince was now too aggressive and conspicuous. After seeing the feedback, he threw the memorial directly in the third prince's face. Gu Zhiyi was beaten up in public by the enraged third prince. However, the officials who were given the task at this critical moment and dared to clean up the mess took this opportunity to rise to power. Gu Zhiyi came to me like a madman and questioned me. "You hate me so much that you recommended all those retainers from your previous life to be officials instead of letting them serve me. I have sought out many talented people who were not recognized and provided them with advice and suggestions." His policy proposals would be combed over by these people like a comb to check for omissions and add details, so that once the policy proposals came out, they would often amaze people. As time went by, he thought that was his own level, just like the cheaters who succeeded more, so he cheated himself. These people are truly talented. When they gather together, they are like fire rising to the sky. When they disperse, they are like stars in the sky. They just lack an opportunity to climb up. I can promote a lowly horse slave to be my chief minister. I am very good at maneuvering and have a keen eye for people. There is no reason why I cannot promote more high-ranking officials and famous ministers. I knew the preferences and temperaments of all high-ranking officials and scholars, and mobilized all of my grandmother and father's connections to recommend these retainers to them and send them to the court. There are many talented people, but the relationship between husband and wife is changeable, and it is difficult to find a mentor. Gu Zhiyi would only think that as his wife, it is natural for me to make plans for him, and these people would be grateful for my recognition when they become successful. When they become famous, half of the new nobles in the court will be the retainers of the Wei family. I looked at his bruised face and purple eyes, but I couldn't help laughing. After all, Zhang Xingjin had been reluctant to hit him in the face before, but the third prince was not fond of men and always punched him in the face. Maybe she was jealous of his handsome looks. I have to thank you for that. Without you, a pheasant, how can they stand out as real phoenixes? 22. When the emperor was awarding rewards according to merit, my father fell ill. Old injuries had recurred over the years, and his condition was very serious. Only I, his only son, could go to the court to receive the rewards on his behalf. The award in the imperial edict was beyond everyone's expectations because it was directed at me. The emperor was grateful for my father's military achievements. He had no sons but only one daughter. In order to prevent the marquis's line from being cut off, he named me the crown princess. 100 years later, I would inherit the title of Marquis of Huaining. All my descendants, both boys and girls, would be legitimate descendants and would carry on the line from generation to generation. The whole court was shocked. For the Huaining Marquis, this military achievement in exchange for the title of princess was almost equivalent to no reward at all. However, this award was shocking and indeed a very special and thoughtful gift from the emperor. Of course, the emperor knew that this reward was too little, but out of pity for me as an orphan, he granted me a wish. I heard that you and Prince Yunnan were childhood sweethearts and are in love with each other. How about I take this opportunity to arrange a marriage for you? These words sound like a question, but they're full of suspicion and temptation. The Wei family is a huge pie. Whoever gets the pie will be uneasy in his sleep. not to mention the Yunnan Palace, a founding king of a different surname who also holds the military power of the Southern Empire. If our two families were to marry, I'm afraid he wouldn't be able to sleep well tonight. My father is seriously ill. I am afraid that he will never be able to go to war again and share the worries of your majesty. I was not able to grow up in his lap. I only wish to be filial to him from now on. I beg your majesty to allow me to establish my own family and marry as I please. If I don't marry, I will only seek bribes. The emperor was very pleased. My request was exactly what he wanted. He actually hoped that I would never get married, so that the whining marquisate would end without an heir. The idea of marrying a son-in-law has cut off my chance of marrying into the nobility. As long as they can afford it, no prominent family will let their good son become a son-in-law. Even if there is a son, he will definitely not be an important one and will not be able to become a prominent figure. He never expected that there would be such a weird person like Yan Pei. The tall and graceful Prince Yunnan shouted in the court, "I am willing to marry the princess, even if it is as a concubine." The emperor angrily accused him of disrupting the order of the court and ordered his guards to carry him away and rush him out of the palace. A proper reward system was set up, but ended in chaos. When I was leaving the palace, I looked at the minor official who was walking alone, and no one was paying attention to him. He was also looking at me and bowed to me with his court tablet in hand. "Congratulations, my lady, for getting what you wished for." I bowed in return. "I also wish that your advice will be accepted by His Majesty and that you'll be promoted step by step." I presented the famous paintings of the ancient sages as gifts and asked the Grand Tutor to make suggestions and confer the title of King of Jinbei on my father, jumping 2 levels and ranking among the princes of the opposite sex. The Grand Tutor knew very well that the emperor would never accept it. He was also semi-retired and had no real power. He could not resist the temptation of the famous painting, so he readily agreed. Then, I was asked by a retainer who had just established himself in the imperial court and was in urgent need of political achievements to confer upon me the title of Crown Princess, which was extraordinary and outstanding among all the honors. If you want to open the window, you just have to lift up the roof first, and the effect is obvious. I just didn't expect such a variable as Yan Pei to occur, but it's not a big deal. Yan Pei was waiting anxiously at the palace gate, and officials passing by glanced at us with ambiguous eyes. I was about to ignore him, but he looked at me and said, "Sister, let me take you home." "Don't bother, Prince. The Wei family's carriage is waiting outside the palace gate. If you had known this, why would you have come to provoke me? I've even packed the betrothal gifts, but your wife just ran away. You and I are classmates, betrothed to each other, and childhood sweethearts. Bah, you conscienceless little liar." His eyes were filled with curiosity and exploratory desire. I really wanted to slap him and wonder why the guard in front of him didn't keep him away. I dragged him into the palace's carriage and asked him why he did this. Yan Pei smiled bitterly. "Your Majesty is jealous of Uncle Wei, so why wouldn't he be jealous of my family? Marrying you is the best way out. Sister, you have deceived me so badly. Please allow me to use you this time." But I disagreed. I didn't retreat. I retreated again and again. There was no place to retreat. I could only face the challenge head-on. If you help a person who is not suspicious to ascend the throne, there will be no need to retreat. 23. Jiang Xingjin's child was not born, and she acted in a cowardly manner. Shi Lu took advantage of her unpreparedness, gagged her, and took her to a secluded place. She carved the words "slut" on her face and stabbed her in the abdomen. Knowing that she could not escape, she jumped into a well and committed suicide. When he was pulled up, the through-the-face scar on his face was in a state of disrepair. During the autopsy, the coroner found that the scar had been opened again after healing, and there was no way to apply medicine to the bleeding, so they had to use gunpowder to burn the wound to stop the bleeding. Although Jiang Xingjin saved his life, he could no longer have children. The scars on his face were very deep and uneven, and he was probably disfigured. Xian, he told me. The eldest lady stopped taking the medicine, so she went to ask Shi Lu for it. She naturally couldn't give it back, But when the eldest lady saw that her face had improved a lot, she knew that she must have hidden it. Not only did she take away the medicine, she also opened the scar and forced her to continue taking the medicine. Now the young lady cannot stand the mirror and cannot even look at the water surface. She has spent a lot of money to find that traveling merchant in the capital. It's such a pity that Lu died like this. It's so easy to die. Now my cousin probably needs to apply the medicine all over her face, so continue to apply it to her as much as she wants. As expected of the master and servant, both of them like to carve words on their faces. Although Jiang Xingjin never went out of the house again, she had a lot of debts from her extravagant life, most of which were deposits that people came to Gu's house to collect. All the scattered money piled together made up a huge hole. She used to have a fixed monthly salary in the Jiang family, but after she got married, there was no one to supervise her. The Gu family had no housekeeper to set rules and regulations, so after they became rich, they spent money even more recklessly. So much so that when the debtors came to collect, the huge mansion was not able to pay a single cent. Gu Zhiyi was a generous man who used to write and paint to pay off his debts. When he was young, his unique skill that made him famous was that he could write with both hands at the same time. But he forgot that this was no longer the time when he was an expert in both calligraphy and painting, and every word he wrote was worth 1,000 gold coins, and every painting he made was worth tens of thousands of taels of silver. In my previous life, I did a lot to build up his momentum. I asked him to learn the calligraphy and painting of famous artists, and then asked craftsmen to make it look old, so that he could fool the appraisal of the auction houses in Beijing and sell it as an authentic work at a sky-high price, and then tear it into pieces. He said it was a fake copy made by my husband and was not worth the price. If the customer liked it, he would copy another one for free. But the sky-high price was still there, and afterwards the customer also gave him a considerable amount of money as a reward for his writing. Gu Zhiyi's reputation as an excellent calligrapher and painter also rose rapidly. Without the process of becoming famous, no matter how good your paintings are, people will not buy them. Just at this moment, he wanted to pay off a debt with a painting, but his stall was overturned. Some kind-hearted people wanted to let him pay off his debts with his paintings, but each of his paintings could only fetch a few taels of silver if sold as a decorative item. He owed hundreds of taels of silver, so he would have to paint hundreds or even thousands of paintings to pay off his debts. If Gu Zhiyi agreed, his intact left hand would be crippled. However, the debt collector was pressing for repayment, so he had no choice but to use Jiang Xingjin's dowry to pay off the debt. But Jiang Xingjin still needed to buy facial cream, so how could she let him touch her dowry? During the argument, he even accused Gu Zhiyi of being useless, saying that he didn't even have a proper official position, let alone the prime minister. Gu Zhiyi wanted to divorce his wife in anger, but the third prince was unwilling to lose the support of his eldest uncle, a third-rank official, who settled the account for him. The two of them are now completely tied to the same boat. The palace coup came earlier, but the target was reversed. In the previous life, the emperor relied on the third prince, forcing the eldest prince and the crown prince to join forces to abdicate when he was seriously ill. The third prince rescued him and was appointed as the crown prince before his death. In this life, the third prince was flattered and killed and formed a clique for personal gain, but the emperor was in good health and suppressed him frequently. Seeing that the throne was nowhere in sight, he thought he was powerful and launched a palace coup. It is possible that Gu Zhiyi had not instigated this. He knew so much about the future. How could the third prince let the throne he had obtained fly away? 24. The eldest prince and the crown prince have made great contributions in rescuing the emperor. They were originally at odds with each other, but now they are as close as brothers. The emperor is very pleased. However, at this time, I presented evidence of the Gu family's rebellion, and much of the evidence pointed directly to the eldest prince. The matter of rebellion and conspiracy was of great importance at the time, but when the clues were traced back to Gu Zhiyi's father, they stopped there. Now I have found the letters and private seals that had been hidden for many years. The evidence is conclusive. The emperor was furious and demoted the eldest and third princes to commoners and imprisoned them for life. Gu Zhiyi finally sent away the 9 clans that his father had saved with his life. The third prince was defeated, and his only request was that Gu Zhiyi be handed over to him for punishment, and the emperor agreed. Under these circumstances, it is hard not to suspect that Gu Zhiyi was a spy sent by the eldest prince to be by the third prince's side. No wonder every one of his strategies was adopted, but none of them succeeded. It turns out that the son follows in his father's footsteps. When Gu Zhiyi was taken out of prison and sent to the third prince's residence, he was still struggling desperately. He didn't believe that his father was really guilty of treason. Then, what about the injustice he had endured for so many years and his belief in revenge for his father? I went to give the fallen dog a beating and gave the jailer a few taels of silver. He was like a demon, saying that I had planned it all along just to frame him. You can't bear this? This is more than one thing you've done wrong in your life. Jiang Xingjin is so loved by her parents. How could she feel the same pain as you? How could she get lost in Xiangshan Temple and have no one to help her all night? Only because I just lost my mother and was bullied. I would feel so sorry for you. You said your father died unjustly, and you protected me in the wilderness for a day and a night, comforting me in the pain of losing my mother. That's why I believed you and gave you a huge gift. I always wore a veil and spoke with some caution, not revealing any information. He didn't recognize me, but I recognized him. He was truly a man of honor and glory at that time, and he deserved the saying, "There is no other man like you in the world." If not, no one would help you, for no reason. When he was taken out again, he stopped struggling and seemed to have lost his soul. I only saw you get into the Jiang family's car from a distance. Only the first 10 or so years of his life were full of vigor and vitality, while the rest was just a joke caused by some twists and turns. I have asked Yan Pei. The lynchings in the third prince's residence are no less than those in the imperial palace. With the third prince's current resentment, if Gu Zhiyi, the instigator, does not impose all the punishments on him, he may not even be able to die. The eldest uncle saved Jiang Xingjin on the grounds that Gu Zhiyi divorced his wife, but his own official students were also affected and were demoted again and again. Jiang Xingjin went crazy after returning home and kept saying that she was the wife of the prime minister, a first-rank official, or she was talking nonsense, saying that she was going to marry into the Yunnan palace. The Jiang family had no choice but to lock her up. The aunt loved her daughter so much that she never stopped applying facial cream to her. A little girl who was delivering food accidentally saw her face and was almost frightened to death. It was said that her face was blue, her hair was sparse, and she looked like a female ghost. From then on, her courtyard became a place that no one dared to set foot in. A few months after Gu Zhiyi was taken away by the third prince, a corpse that was no longer human was found on a mass grave outside the capital. It was said that the body was still alive when it was thrown there, but it was probably eaten by wild dogs. Who knows? 25. My father returned his military power and went to travel and recuperate in the south of the Yangtze River, and I was promoted to Marquis of Huaining. I invited my grandmother to live in the mansion to live with her in her old age, but she was unwilling to do so. She moved to a manor that was one of her dowry items and reopened her private school. Later, the private school became a girls' school, and the girls' school became an academy. She said, "I am an old man, but I have great ambitions. You are in a high position now, and I can no longer support you. But the students in the academy are all your comrades, and the millions of women in the world are your backers." The following year, troops from the northern border invaded the border again. The imperial court asked for peace, but the other side required the marriage of their legitimate princess. Otherwise, they would resume the war. The royal family was partial to some and reluctant to let the sixth princess, the peony of the national dynasty, marry off, so they petitioned the court to ask for the eldest princess of the Ding kingdom, who had made great military achievements, to marry off. It was euphemistically said that the princess who was married off represented the reputation of the dynasty and had to be able to subdue the foreign countries. After all, marrying off a princess could at least buy 10 years of stability, and the princess would no longer need to fight in wars. I have made arrangements with everyone, and the emperor's will cannot be disobeyed, and the voices of opposition are weak and have little influence. Even for those who are born again, there are things that cannot be changed. The emperor was not happy with my repeated participation in government affairs, so he appointed me as an envoy to escort the bride. The journey to the marriage is long and bumpy, and the people in the north are rough and barbaric, which is enough to make me suffer. On the day of leaving the capital, the princess's carriage contained only her clothes. I was wearing heavy armor, and behind me followed the elite soldiers I had selected from various states, half of whom were the Wei army that had been dispersed. I just hope I can help her. The world-famous Princess Sting walked side by side with me. Your Majesty sent me as an envoy to escort the emperor. This is an insult to you, the eldest princess. I still couldn't help but provoke. Li Yueshir smiled and said, he also underestimated you, Marquis whining. Thank you for speaking for me in the court. But you see, women all over the world will be proud of us. I looked around and saw high platforms and attics on both sides of the road, with curtains and hats like clouds. It's a long journey, but I know she will come back eventually. I will pave the way for you to return home in the imperial court. Li Yushi laughed heartily, his eyes full of ambition. Lan Qing knows me. In this year, the princess of Ding State, Li Yueshio, was married to a prince in the north. Marquis Wei Lanyan was the chief envoy, and he led his deputy General Exile, he and his troops to see her off for 3,000 miles. For the next 10 years, there was peace in the north without any war.